What's up, guys? We are on the way to the gym once again, and I'm a little tired today. Today was actually the first day that the cold plunge was really cold, and I didn't actually take the temperature of it, but it must have been in the 40s. I really hope it was in the 40s. If that was the 50s, then the 40s is going to be brutal because I just got in and it was insanity. Instantly almost, I was numb, but still very cold. And I only did about 2 minutes today. Normally, I'd like to do a little bit longer. I'd like to do maybe 5. But boy, oh boy, there was a freeze warning for our area last night. And so everything got super cold. I'm assuming the water was around the 40s, though. It's a big tub. It takes a while to cool off. And the weird thing was, the cover, when I came out this morning, the cover had been taken off. Maybe it had been blown off by some wind, but there were some like little plant mattery things that had fallen, just like it's spring's on the way, and plants and trees are dropping weird stuff. And so there was some plant mattery stuff that had gotten in there. I got it out. There was a little bit of pollen. I'll have to clean the tub out, next time I change the water, but it was weird. Yeah, I don't know if someone took the cover off or if an animal took it off. We do have some cats in the neighborhood and they wander around, and maybe they were curious what it was. Maybe they tore the cover off, but there were no scratches or anything that I could see. So I'm going to assume it was the wind. But I got up around 7:15 to do that. It took a bit of time, just to get myself out there and actually doing it, because it was very cold this morning. And it was very pleasant after the fact. I really enjoyed having done it. Doing it wasn't really that enjoyable. It was not great being in the tub, but I think that's kind of the point. I think that you're supposed to not enjoy it, and that actually makes it better for you. So I guess that's a new daily tradition that I'll be engaging in, as long as it's relatively cold. There's no point in jumping in 60 or 70 degree water, I don't think. That just seems like maybe a waste of time. On days that it's warm, I'll probably just, do what I normally do, which is just walk around the neighborhood a little bit, get my blood pumping that way. This was a really great wake up, though. It certainly woke me up. It did not last forever. It's now 5 o'clock, and I did that at 7 in the morning. It's been a pretty busy day. I just spent it making some videos in the first part of the day after, having breakfast and just going through my typical morning routine. And after the videos, I had a call with my product manufacturer. We just figured out some of the final details. We've got the final batch on the way very soon. And and then I'll place the actual order for the product itself. And we will have that, probably my guess is April 10th to 15th, somewhere in there is my hope of when I'll be able to. Probably closer to the 15th. I honestly won't even be back in town until the 10th, so I'll need a couple of days to just, put the final finishing touches on whatever. And we should be good to go. And there will be a big announcement coming out on the channel, on the main channel on YouTube also. I'll post an announcement there. And I'm really looking forward to this. This next version that I'm going to get is going to be way better than what I've been testing in the past, and I've already really liked what I've been testing. So keep an eye out for that. That's going to be super fun. But it was just a draining day. The call itself wasn't bad, but just having any kind of meeting, there's a little, for me, for whatever reason, whenever there's any kind of meeting, I have a little bit of anxiety about it. I'm just like, oh man, I've got to, I don't know why. This was not a big stressful meeting by any means. It was a very pleasant meeting, but just before anything, before I would do any kind of presentation, even before I would make, a more serious YouTube video like these, I just click record and I'm going. But before I would do any of those stock market videos that I used to do, there wasn't, by the end of it, I wasn't actually that worried, but certainly in the beginning, there was a bit of anxiety before starting one, and even during them sometimes, in the beginning more so than at the end. At a certain point, I just got into the groove and I was releasing multiple a day, and I feel like anything that you do super regularly, you're not going to be too worried about. Maybe not true if it's something like the cold plunge, just because there is, you might actually become more worried. It might be a Pavlov's dog situation, where you just have a negative reinforcement for doing that thing. I mean, granted, it's negative in the beginning when you first get into that cold water, but then I felt pretty good afterwards. So who knows how that's going to play out. But for more mundane things, more normal things that people might be doing day to day, that a lot of people might be anxious about, I think that as long as you do if you do something once a day, I'm going to say, is probably where you're almost guaranteed to not be worried about doing it anymore, as long as it's not actually hurting you. If it's something like presenting in front of people, or, whatever it could be, if it's going to a meeting, or, doing something, typically, I feel like anxieties stem from doing things in front of people and being judged, but maybe that's just me. Maybe, if it could even be something like if you're afraid of heights, honestly. I think just doing something once a day and getting exposure to whatever it is that makes you kind of fearful ends up eliminating the fear, as long as you keep it up. I think that, if you were to stop doing that repeated stimulus, if you were to stop exposing yourself to that, then maybe the anxiety would come back. And I'm thinking of a very specific example with myself. Once again, it's a physical thing. It's whenever I get out of the car, I'm always kind of anxious to touch the door handle to close the car door, because oftentimes some static will have built up and I'll get shocked whenever I touch it. So I'm always just like dreading touching the car door to close the door. But you've got to close the car door. And honestly, if you don't discharge the static on the car itself, you're going to get shocked on some metal object that you touch. So you may as well just do it on the car and not be surprised by random little things. But that is one more, just a weird example that I've thought of. Every time I think of it, whenever I go to a gas station, for some reason, it seems a lot more worrying in my mind, because they have that picture on a lot of gas pumps of, someone getting an electric shock, and then that ignites some of the gas fumes. And there's like a big warning sticker on a lot of gas pumps that say, watch out for electric shock, because I don't imagine it's at all likely that you would blow up a gas station by touching your car, but it's just something that I think about sometimes when that happens. I don't know why. A weird me thing. But for more mundane things, I'm trying to think, what makes me nervous? I think that a big one for a lot of people, this could technically affect anyone, but a lot of guys, I think, are nervous to talk to new people. Girls just seem to find it a little bit easier, and maybe that's because people are potentially friendlier to girls. I don't know if that's the case. I always do my best to be friendly to everyone who comes and talks to me, but I feel like I used to be very nervous to talk to anyone new. If it was someone who I didn't know, if it wasn't a friend of mine, I just didn't want to talk to anyone. I was very scared to actually go up and do it. And then even if someone came up and talked to me, I was nervous and wanted to end the conversation as quickly as possible, and didn't want to have anything to do with interacting with strangers. And it wasn't at all, I don't think, out of being scared of strangers in particular. I don't know exactly what it was. Probably something about not wanting to be judged, or I don't know exactly what, but that's something that I just, over the past couple of years, ever since I got into college, really, I just started making an effort to talk to people in everyday life. And it is kind of exhausting. I don't always do it as much as I should. But, every day have the opportunity to. And so a lot of the times I'll do it if I'm at the gym. That's just a great, like, low stakes place where you can kind of exercise that muscle and talk to people you don't know. You also have a great excuse to be talking to people you don't know. If you want to work out on the same machine as them, or, just work in with them, then that's a great opportunity to just get in there and strike up a conversation with someone and just chat for a little bit. And I feel like that's been really helpful. That's the most recent place that I've been. I mean, obviously, you could do it anywhere. You could do it at a party or a bar, or, you could do it in class back, if you're in class. I'm not in classes anymore, but yeah, you could really do it anywhere. Even at a grocery store, there'll be, some old people that are making a joke about lettuce or something to you, and you talk back to them. I feel like young people don't do that, but older people seem to want to talk to other people more. And it's probably because they grew up without technology, or without, modern screen-based technology, which, it is a little sad to me that I grew up with it. I mean, I was at a good point where it's not nearly as prevalent as it is now. Fortunately, when I was a kid, when I was 5 years old, I mean, there were televisions, but there weren't really touch phones that you would take around. I remember those first became a thing while I was in elementary school, but I didn't get, a touch phone, like a phone that wasn't buttons, for many years. I mean, I didn't have a phone in elementary school. I got one in middle school when I started riding the bus, and it was just like one of those phones that slid and kind of like split in half, and there would be like a keyboard under, half of the phone that you could then type on. It was cool. I liked it. It wasn't a flip phone, but it was like a slider phone that would slide like horizontally, and then you could turn the screen, and you could be texting on it like that. So that was a cool phone, and I would use that just to like do phone calls. I wouldn't really text that much at all. It was kind of just a device that I had for safety and convenience reasons. Like, when you're riding on the bus, sometimes the bus would break down while I was on the way back home from school. And I remember the way I actually talked my parents into getting me this phone was because I was riding the bus. It was my first day riding the bus. And I had told them, like, hey, I want a phone so that, if I'm going to be riding the bus, I want a phone so that I can call you guys if anything goes wrong. And they were like, no, you don't need a phone. You were not getting you a phone for a while. And I was like, all right. So the first day, probably the first day of school or something like that. Maybe they drove me in the first couple days, but the first day of me riding the bus, it broke down, and everyone was calling their parents and getting picked up. And I waited on that bus. I mean, there were a bunch of people who waited on the bus. I waited there for probably an hour and a half until I thought to ask someone else to borrow their phone and call my parents. And so I did. We were so close to my house, by the way. The bus driver wouldn't let us get off and walk because I was seriously like a 15-minute walk from my house. Like, I had been to this location a million times. I knew exactly where I was. I very easily could have walked home. Bus driver wouldn't let it happen, but she would let the parents, if they came and picked the kids up, she would let that happen. So I eventually called my parents, and they had been waiting at the bus stop for me for the past hour and a half, freaking out, not knowing where I was. So it was very funny. We got a phone for me the next day, and that was a fun experience. So that's how I got my first phone, but still, it wasn't a touch phone, and there was no technology integrated into it, really. I mean, I wouldn't use it for anything. And I was, but here's the thing. We did have technology, and I remember I would come home most days, and I would do my homework first, and then a lot of the time I would just be straight onto the computer or the television. And, sometimes there would be some kids playing in the neighborhood or something. We had a basketball hoop outside my house, but most of the time there weren't. And, those kids were older, so it wasn't really the best fit for me. I was like a middle schooler, and these guys were like late high school. And so, or maybe I was in elementary school at the time when they were still around. I think I was in elementary school and they were in high school. And, they'd let me play basketball with them, but It wasn't like a big group of friends in the neighborhood for me, you know? So if I did want to hang out with friends, it had to be orchestrated by my parents. They'd have to drive us somewhere, or my friends' parents would have to drive them to me, and it was just like this whole thing. So a lot of the time I would just be on my computer on a television, and I just feel like I would have really liked if that hadn't even been an option. Just because, as a kid, you don't necessarily, you don't know what the consequences of doing that are. And, it would have been fun to do some more kiddie stuff. I mean, surely, I would, spend time on playgrounds and go to parks and stuff. It's not like I was on these devices all the time, but a significant amount of the time I was. And, looking back, I would have done it differently. But at the same time, I did have a lot of fun. But it would have been nice if that maybe hadn't been an option, and I'd been able to get up to some of the more traditional kid-like things that maybe my parents' generation would have gotten up to. Like just what you see in a TV show about kids from the 60s or the 70s, where they're like riding their bikes around the neighborhood. Just they're looking for stuff to do because entertainment isn't making itself readily available to them. I feel like, the screens and the technology have made themselves too readily available, and I didn't have to do any looking for fun. I didn't have to look very far for fun, and I kind of wish that I had. I wish that I'd had a more robust childhood in a way, from just trying out a bunch of different things, looking for something that was fun instead of just having it at my fingertips. So, raising kids in this world where, the technology's only gotten better. Now it's in your pocket. Now I'm just so glad that I didn't have an actual phone that was following me around all day, because the kids nowadays are in big trouble with TikTok and that kind of stuff. Big trouble. So that's not good for them. That's not going to be good. And I think we're going to end it here, guys. We're about to get to the parking lot, but boy, oh boy, if you've got kids, don't let them use TikTok. That's the final word that I've got for you. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.